Well, hello and welcome to the Excel in Retirement podcast, where we help good people make wise financial decisions so that they can excel in retirement. Your guide is David Treese, a financial advisor who generously shares his expertise so you can have more peace of mind. And I'm your host, Andy Traub. Today, we're going to talk about time is money. And the idea that time is money, sometimes the best way to handle time and money is to just give it more time. So today, David, you're going to walk us through these red flags of timing, things we need to slow down and consider so that we don't make poor financial decisions that negatively affect our legacy. So thanks for being here, David.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. I appreciate it.
So the first one we're going to talk about, and these are areas or situations where you need to really slow down, and these are dangerous zones where you can make major bad financial decisions. And the first is when you are making a decision in haste. And a lot of times it involves a salesperson. Proverbs tells us that, when you're hasty, you can come to poverty. So basically, like, slow down. So what are some sales situations, some consumer situations that involve haste where people can make really big, bad financial decisions?
Well, something that comes to mind living in the South like we do is your HVAC. That can be a real challenge for you. We actually had a situation a couple of years ago and the air conditioning went out. Luckily, it was kind of sort of like right now we're in between spring and summer, and you can not use the air conditioning and you might be okay. Well, Andy, I called this guy up and I'd seen their vans around town and called him up, and he came out first thing on a Friday morning. And I don't know, have you ever interacted with somebody and it's like, how are you having such a bad day this early in the morning? This guy was one more grumpy individual, and he told me, I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but he said basically it was going to cost $4,500 to repair our HVAC unit. I said, okay, well, what does a new unit cost? And he said, well, I'll have to call the office. So he calls the office, he comes back, and it's about $8,500 for a new unit. And so I said, well, basically what you're telling me is that it's about half of the cost of a new unit to repair it, and then I'm not going to be absolutely certain that the repair is going to hold long. And so basically I've got just about a third to a half of the cost into a repair. And I said, well, I'm just going to have to think about that. And so I called the next HVAC van that I see riding around town. The guy comes out that afternoon, and he says, and keep in mind, our house is about 6-7 years old at this point. He says, well, it looks like your ductwork is installed wrong, and that's wrong, and we're going to need to repair that. And it was some ungodly amount of money to repair it. And I said, well, how much does a new unit cost? He was like, well, we got to send another technician out for that. So the other technician comes out and he starts walking around and says he's going to put a new pad down for the unit, and he's going to give us a new temperature gauge. And I'm like, listen, man, we're going to move from here in a year or two. I don't really care about a digital gauge I can set my air from the work with. It doesn't really matter. Right. He's like, well, you can take it with you. And then he starts talking about the monthly cost, and I'm like, hold up, I don't want to know about the monthly cost. I want to know about the actual cost, and it was thousands of dollars more than what a unit should cost. And I said, okay, well, I'll think about that. And luckily, we found a friend of a friend and came out on a Sunday afternoon, and he was the first one that took me around to show me the leak where the coolant had leaked out of the unit. And so he's like, you got $400 or $500 in that repair or more coolant, and then I'll charge you $150 to solder this back together. I was like, well, if you do that, I'll pay you $250 to do that.
Yeah.
And the thing held up for the rest of the time we were in the house. But if we had made a hasty decision and going with that first guy because we wanted instant relief from the heat or whatever, we would have made a really, really poor financial decision.
Yeah. And there are times when, your wife's like, hey, honey, get this thing fixed. You know what I mean? And I'm sure there's some pressure to be like, well, I guess we got to do it. But if you take, if you said, honey, we got to go stay in a hotel for 3 nights, while we get this figured out to do some research, that might cost you $500, but it's not going to charge you $5,000 where you made a hasty decision, right? I mean, you want to avoid situations where you're really stuck, right? And so doing that research, taking time to do that is wise. I know there's some other situations Buying cars is another one where people a lot of times.
Yeah, so we just want to make informed decisions. And so, in the age of the internet, you can just about know what people are going to be asking for stuff before you get to a car dealership or somewhere like that. But just really slowing down and understanding what your costs are and what your long-term projected costs are with owning a car is huge. And another thing could be solar panels. Those are really popular now. You ride around and see those on people's houses. And you really need to slow down and sharpen your pencil, in my opinion, and understand what the cost is going to be of that. And then especially, this is even doubly true if you're having to finance those, so that you understand those charges as well.
Yeah, and I really appreciate. I mean, obviously, the internet can be a massively wonderful source for information of why to do something, but also to remember it can be a great resource of why not to do something, right? So, you could use whatever tool you want and just say, tell me 10 reasons why people don't buy or regret buying XYZ, right? Not just give me 10 reasons to buy it or 10, what are the 10 best things about it.
Right.
And so that's, again, the idea, the first idea is don't make a decision in haste
Yes.
quickly. Now, there are a couple situations where you might have to really make the decision, but that's usually when there's a limited resource, like a home. You're bidding on a home. Like, yeah, you need to decide today. Why? Because 3 other people are bidding, so we got to decide, right? But many times there's artificial pressure put on
Yeah.
by salespeople.
Right, right. There really can be. And with interest rates going up and less homes for sale or less people that can qualify for them, that monkey is off of our back a lot of times right now when we're buying a home, which is great, and that it gives us more capacity to think through things and make better decisions. It was really wild when around here people were buying houses sight unseen for a while, and it was really crazy. But yeah, the benefit of time brings a lot of clarity, and I think we could probably all, if we thought about it, review situations in our lives where if we just allowed more timing, we could get more clarity, and we can allow God to even speak to us so that we can understand what is the most appropriate decision for us long term. And I think that most wise decisions are taking a little bit of time. We never ask people when they meet with us or have an initial call to choose to do business with us that day. And in fact, we typically will consider that to be bad business. We've had people want to start relationships with us with one meeting and the first time they've met us, and it just generally does not work well. And so I want to give you a week or whatever you need to develop your questions and concerns so that we get all of that out on the table, and we talk through any of those things so that you can be as comfortable as possible. And it's really kind of difficult to do that with one interaction oftentimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second area of, involving the wisdom of waiting can really be when you have sudden wealth. And that doesn't mean that you won the lottery, though it might, right? But these are times when you have an influx of unexpected income. Let me give you a couple examples, and then I want you to kind of share what you would encourage people to do.
Yeah.
So the first one might be that you get a bonus at work. They say, hey, this year we're going to give everyone a $10,000 bonus or $15,000 bonus. What would you advise one of your clients to do if they got an unexpected influx from a work bonus?
Well, we certainly want to evaluate what debt you have, and if there's consumer debt like credit cards and stuff like that, that may be very helpful with wiping those out. And another thing that can be done is typically with $10,000 or more, you may be able to recast your mortgage payment. So if you brought $10,000 to the mortgage company, they would recast it, and it could lower your monthly payments. And so that's something else you could look at depending on the size of the bonus. But that is one thing. And then if we haven't funded our Roth IRAs or our traditional IRAs, that could be an appropriate place to put those in tax advantaged accounts, and just having more wiggle room. Before we do all of those things, though, I would ensure that we have a solid emergency fund. Probably before we even pay off that debt, I would want to see a solid emergency fund so that we could avoid future debt. And so that is huge. But that all hinges on understanding what it takes to pay your bills every month, And so we really advocate for understanding what your monthly outlay is so that you can make informed financial decisions. Because if you don't know that and you're not keeping a close eye on it, it can be really challenging to make good decisions.
Absolutely. Well, another area of sort of sudden wealth might be with people selling homes, and you find yourself with, a difference, obviously a profit. Most people are going to then use that money to buy another home.
Yep.
But, are there situations where, maybe people are even downsizing where they've got, there's people that move to my area from California and they sell their house for cash. They buy, and they buy a house here for cash and they still have money left over.
Yeah.
Right.
That's huge. Yeah, we recently had a client that sold some property and she put the money to work and wanted to invest it. She didn't want to squander it, and she had a highly appreciated asset, and that worked out really well for her. But just understanding that the temptation, especially the younger we are, it seems, the more this is applicable, that it's easy for us to find homes for that money. And Solomon, going all the way back to Proverbs, was warning that wealth gained hastily often dwindles, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. And it's so true. It's like with the income that we make, it typically wasn't just a sudden increase. It was just a slowly building up. And so we can appreciate it and use that pay that we earn appropriately. And so there's that temptation, especially in our youth and when we're younger, to squander those things because we don't fully appreciate it. And so super important to just let it settle, and if you don't know what the best thing is, just leaving the money in cash in a bank account may be okay for a few months. Now, we never want to leave money like that without good intentions just sitting somewhere, because we're losing purchasing power through inflation. But if we don't know what to do and we don't have clarity on that, I would just park it in a bank account and wait. And I think with time, you would have better clarity. That's what I've done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I also consider and think about, for those listening that work with you, they can just pick up the phone and call you. But I also think, you should feel good about, and you should have the kind of relationship and the kind of advisor that you can call and just say, hey, this is my situation. What can we do? What should we do here? That's what a true financial advisor. They're not just buying stocks for you or selling you insurance. A true planner, it's going to say, okay, where could this fit in the plan, right?
Agree completely. Yes, I think it's huge, and I love those strategy calls when we have the calls like that with folks, because it's fun to me, and we get to solve a problem and kind of work a puzzle, and no two puzzles are the same.
Yeah. Well, the last one we're going to talk about, and this is really timely, is the idea of trying to time the market. And listen, I think that we all understand that there's people out there that wake up every day and they try to trade stocks. They wake up in the morning and they've got a tip, they've got a hunch, and obviously now there's all kinds of computer programs, but there's people that they literally wake up every day and they trade stocks to try to make money, individual stocks.
Mm-hmm.
The uniqueness of this is right now, given the fact that we're actively in a war that involves oil, is the prices of specific companies and oil companies, things like that. It's very centralized, meaning you could say, hey, okay, I know oil's involved in this war, so I'm going to pay attention to these oil companies or whatever it might be, or even electric car companies, given oil prices going, and people trying to time the market given sort of what's in the news. Right. So where have you seen that, work or not work with clients?
That we generally strongly discourage speculative investing, which I think is basically what you described, because when we're speculating, we really have to be right a couple times, and we have to know if we're selling a position, we have to know when to get out, and nobody knows the future, and so you don't really know with absolute certainty that is the best time to get out. And then once you're out, you have the even harder decision of knowing when to get back in. And I think the COVID year in 2020 is the perfect example. And when everything was really perilous filling, the market was crashing and went down about 37%, and then it boomeranged back up. And if we would have gotten out, it would have been very, very easy that year to have missed the rebound. But the market ended up finishing up that year. And so that is often a recipe for disaster for many people, because you just don't know what the future is going to hold. And we even, when it comes to IPOs and initial public offerings and things like that, we don't know how that is going to be received from the public. And so we steer clear of stuff like that but most of our clients are near retirement or in retirement. And I can't say this enough. I really think it's important that we switch from that accumulation stance for at least the money that we're going to use for income, and we switch it to an income and distribution stance where we take a little less risk and we figure out how to make our money last long enough in retirement. Super important.
Yeah, what I would also say is that, it's hard because you see the gains, I mean, today the market was up 3% or something like that. And you think, oh, it'd be great if I got 3% in one day, right? But, the swings, they can be really painful, right?
Yes.
They can be really painful. And the other is that the market is not always logical. So, or doesn't always fit our logic. So there's a lot of people in America who feel like America is in really bad shape.
Right.
And whether it's politically or economically or, all these things, they just think, man, America is not doing well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can look at the stock market, and the stock market is basically saying, hey, we're good.
Right.
We're really good. Things are great. And now both those things might be true, for an individual, their life might not be great, but the market. So the other is other people might be really optimistic,
Yes.
but then the market is not going to match that. Right. So again, the response to that is what for people? What is the response to the relationship with the market instead of trying to time it?
I think both things can be right. You can be gravely concerned with the trajectory of our country and understand that we have one of the most robust economies in the world. And so despite challenges, we can have a good market even when there's turmoil brewing. And in my opinion, that's what we've seen this year, that we can still have good corporate earnings from publicly traded companies despite the Iran war and the fears about AI and things like that. What we want to do when we're close to retirement is we want to take 10 years of bill paying money and money that we want to spend over the next 10 years, and we want to invest it more conservatively so that we can depend on that money for the next decade. And then we allow any money in excess of that to be our long-term appreciation money. And so the idea is we created a 10-year buffer where we can let that money ride and we're not speculating, because it's like Warren Buffett taught, we get rich by slowly. It doesn't typically come very fast. And so the biggest benefit we all have is time, and time allows compound interest to work. And so if we can create that 10-year window or more, then it can allow us to have greater success typically over the lifetime of a person than if we're just taking money in and out of the market. We try to strongly discourage that.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to mention, and this is interesting because I think it's, when I was a kid, gambling was hard. Like, you had to go to a casino, or you had to, whatever it might be, and different states had different rules or whatever. Well, one of the things that I think that people growing up, and maybe this is for those who are listening, they need to have a conversation with their kids or whatever, but I know a lot of young people in their 20s, some in their 30s, who are getting really caught up in online betting.
Yeah.
Right. And so you talk about making money in haste and when not to do something, it's unfortunately, it's become so easy to gamble now, right?
Yes.
That another area of the wisdom of, waiting is just understanding that a lot of times the easier it is to get access to, the more dangerous it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's another danger zone of decision making is, and you talk about speculation, which is it just triggered in me. You talk about speculating. It's Bob's going to get 22 points tonight, and Larry's going to get 10 rebounds. And if I do that, I make, you know what I mean? So it's just, I guess, one more area of caution
Yes.
about haste, about danger zones of making money. And then I'll let you share your thoughts and we'll wrap up.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's tons of benefits to the internet. I mean, we couldn't be recording this podcast today without the internet, but with things speeding up, I mean, in my view, is sped up the rate of depravity too. I think
Mm,
is what you just described, and I think that that's going to have a net negative for society, sports betting and gambling in general. And I personally seen it ruin people in my family gambling, and that's when it was harder, and to do, and you had to go somewhere to do it, kind of thing. And so it's not a good practice, and it is money that is normally wasted. And I don't know. It grieves me to hear that, that is so readily a thing, and I think that it really affects men probably more so by and large. We're the ones participating in that, and so yeah, we probably can't sound the warning horn loud enough about that.
yeah, I appreciate that. And again, I think it goes to that haste idea. It goes to sudden wealth. Remember, these companies are marketing to us. They are saying, your first bet, you get $200. Da, da, da. I mean, it's just, if it
I mean,
sounds too good to be true, we
right.
know how that sentence ends, right?
The thing about it is gambling, if you call it an addiction or whatever, it doesn't stay just there. It normally leads into other addictions and excesses of bad behavior is where that tends to lead. In my experience, that's human nature. One thing builds upon another. And this is probably not the path you're wanting to go with this, but that's where my mind goes with it. And so it doesn't just leave you at gambling. If you get far enough into it and desperate enough, it goes somewhere else, whether that's
Absolutely.
substance or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, David, I appreciate your insight into those different areas, the hasty trap of sort of the consumerism or making big purchases, the sudden wealth danger zone of coming into a sizable amount of money and feeling like I should be doing something with it right away. And then the last one being just really trying to time the market and sort of get into that speculative nature. Those are all things to avoid. And if this is a conversation that you're not having with your advisor, then I want you to reach out to David. His contact information will be in the show notes. And as always, David, thank you for your time.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Investment advisory services offered through Creative One Wealth, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Clients excel in Creative One Wealth or unaffiliated entities. We are not affiliated with or endorsed by any government agency and do not provide tax or legal advice. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. No investment strategy can guarantee a profit or protect against loss. Licensed insurance professional. Insurance and annuity products are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Investment advisory services are provided in accordance with a fiduciary duty of care and loyalty that includes putting your interests first and disclosing conflicts. Insurance services have a best interest standard, which requires recommendations to be in your best interest. Advisors may receive commission for the sale of insurance and annuity products.